Hey, it's Mr. Honish here to talk about organizing your DBQ, document-based question essays, a step-by-step guide. So the first thing you should consider is what is the question I am being asked. Every DBQ essay has a question for you to respond to, and typically they come in multiple parts. So you need to analyze if it's giving you a certain time period to work with. If it's asking for a specific time frame, you should only answer about things within that time frame. It might also ask you to answer to a certain extent. There are very, very few black and white answers, very, very few clear-cut one way or the other answers in a DBQ essay. Usually, it is going to be to a great extent, to some extent, to a small extent. Our first example is going to be how democratic was early America. You're trying to answer somewhere on that spectrum. So you need to figure out to what extent something existed. And then finally, think about your background knowledge. What do you already know about that question? So start building a case in your head before you even look at the documents. Step 2 is to look at the documents themselves. Read the documents with the question in mind. This is a pretty basic reading strategy. If you know the purpose of your reading, you know what to look for in your reading. So as you read the documents, think about how this matches up with the question you were asked. Sort the documents once you're done based on how they would support an answer to the question. In our example, how democratic was early America? If I'm reading document 1 and I think, wow, that has a lot of examples of very democratic things going on in early America, I might kind of mentally categorize it on one side. If I read document 2 and I think, wow, this doesn't make early America look democratic at all, I'll put it on the other side. So separate it based on how it would answer the question. Step 3 is finally time to start writing. You get into your first paragraph. This is going to be an introduction, and it's going to wrap up with a very important sentence, your claim. That's the direct answer to the question. So first, I recommend setting the scene. Give some background information, give some context, let them know what's going on at the time period. So again, you're referring back to the question and the time frame involved. Give some background information. A brief preview of the documents you will use is appropriate here. You don't want to get into too much detail and support quite yet, but if you know that you're going to use certain documents in the body paragraphs of your essay, you can kind of mention them here. Give a little taste, just a little taste of those documents. And then finally, the last sentence of your introduction paragraph should be your claim, your definitive answer. So you should answer the question directly with a very debatable and defensible claim. Step 4 is getting to the body paragraph. This is where your support comes in. This is where your evidence comes in. This is where you're using the documents that you were provided. So present the documents that support your claim is the most important thing to remember. You don't want to use documents that aren't very good support for your claim. Cite the documents whenever you refer to them. Be very specific. They all have little descriptions on them. They give you a time frame. They give you an author or an artist or whatever the case may be. So cite those documents when you use it. And then build off of the document. Explain why it answers your claim or why it supports your claim. Explain why it answers the question. Give that reasoning. You need to prove through explanation that the document supports your claim. Step 5 is a little bit advanced. You might not want to try throwing this in until you're absolutely ready and you feel confident with the other steps, but you should address a counterclaim. Acknowledge the opposing viewpoint. You might have claimed one side. You want to at least address the fact that there are other opinions out there, or that it could be answered another way. But you definitely need to make sure that your claim still seems better. You don't want to oversell the counterclaim. You don't want to make it sound too good. Acknowledge that it's there, but don't paint it in a positive way. Finally, we wrap up with our conclusion. Your conclusion is kind of simple if you wrote a good introduction. Just flip it around and write your introduction in reverse. You can restate your claim. That was the last sentence on your first paragraph. Now it can be the first sentence on your last paragraph. Then remind your reader of your supporting evidence. Again, briefly. You don't have to go in and give the full support again, but just remind them of the documents that you used. And then there's a couple never should you evers. I don't think these are good ideas to use in any DBQ for any reason. First, don't use first person tense. Don't refer to yourself as I or my. I am going to use document 3. No, just get into document 3. You don't have to say anything about I'm doing this. Don't use second person, referring to your reader directly. Don't say you or your. Don't ask them questions. You may think that, so you can clearly see that. Don't refer to the reader in your writing. No second person. And then finally, this is academic writing. You want to state it as fact. So don't use opinion. Don't say I think or I believe the message of this document is. Don't be wishy-washy and say, well, I would say this. No, state it as fact. It's going to be more persuasive if you just say, look, this is the way it is. So state it as fact.